Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Snow, and alongside me is HuskerOnline's Robin Washut. Nebraska just finished up their Friday practice today, and we got a chance to hear from Thorir Thorben-Narson and head coach Fred Hoiberg. Hoiberg said, it's winter break for the Huskers, but they have a game tomorrow against North Dakota, and they just had an impressive win against Purdue. How do they keep this momentum going forward?
Yeah, this is another new taste of adversity that this team is going to have to try to overcome because it's unique now in the fact that they just played two of their best games of the season against some of the toughest competition they faced all year, losing in overtime at Indiana and then 48 hours later beating Purdue and dominating them. And so now they've had a week off since that great weekend. And now North Dakota comes to town, and the name on the front of that jersey doesn't necessarily have the same ring as an Indiana or Purdue. And you're coming off finals week, and then look ahead to next week. Kids get to go home for Christmas, and so there's a lot of just off the court stuff where the energy and effort, you got to make sure it's there. And I think that was kind of a message the staff was really trying to hammer home over the course of this week was, don't feel all high and mighty and like they're rolling out the red carpet like you guys have done something because as we've seen, even going back to the first two games of the season, these games can be dangerous, and especially against a North Dakota team that is not going to be intimidated whatsoever. They went and just played Gonzaga already. So coming to Lincoln, Nebraska is not going to be anything that they are not prepared for. So if Nebraska doesn't come out ready to play and play with that same type of energy and effort and focus, they could be in some trouble. So I think that has been kind of the hardest message that they've been trying to get across to these guys over the past few days is, don't let up. Make sure that you bottle up whatever you were doing during that great weekend in those two Big Ten games and find a way to carry that over where you're consistently bringing that night in, night out.
Well, the biggest news probably today is that head coach Fred Hoiberg announced that Gervais Green would return to the team tomorrow against North Dakota. Now, he was suspended the last few games, but what does this mean for Nebraska?
Well, it's going to be interesting because Gervais, he was about as big of a mainstay in the lineup as you possibly could imagine. He started the first 9 games, was playing over 31 minutes per game, and even after missing the past 2 games due to that suspension, he still ranks in the top 3 in the team in points, rebounds, steals, blocks, assists, and made three-pointers. So, that guy is about as high volume as it gets across the board, and Nebraska was suddenly without him just hours before tip-off of that Indiana game because he traveled to Indiana and was featured prominently in the Nebraska social media hyping up that game, and then they announced that he's suspended indefinitely, doesn't play against Indiana, doesn't play against Purdue. Coincidentally, that's as good as Nebraska's looked all year, and I think people are trying to put 2 and 2 together that so if they throw Gervais back in the mix now, is that going to throw out all that mojo that they were able to build in kind of with their backs against the wall in those 2 Big Ten games? So, that's a legitimate question. I think Hoiberg is going to ease Gervais back into the mix. He's not going to start. Thorir Thorben-Narson is going to start for the 4th straight game, and Gervais is going to come off the bench. And it's going to be really interesting to see what just those minutes look like for Gervais and what types of roles and lineup combinations they put him in. Because, there's tangible evidence right now that guys like Deshaun Burke, guys like Cam Mack, guys like Thor, all elevated their games in Gervais' absence. And so, you don't want to throw that off entirely, but also Gervais is a talented enough player that you have to get him involved. So it's going to be fun to watch how Hoiberg and the staff handle that, not only Saturday, but next week in that final non-conference game. See if they can get maybe a perfect combination of how to utilize all those guys going into January when Big Ten play starts.
And speaking of that, looking ahead, Nebraska's schedule doesn't get any easier. We're getting deeper into Big Ten play, especially in January. What does Nebraska need to do to really make a run here?
Well, right now you actually have some momentum, and you haven't been able to say that, where you've played 2 straight very good games, and now these last 2 non-con games, you have to keep that going. We mentioned all the different circumstances that are unique. The fact that you're just coming off finals and a week off after feeling good about yourself with those 2 Big Ten games, and then next week, guys are going to go back home and get into some stuff there, and not return until probably the 26th, and then all of a sudden you got to flip the switch back on and get ready for the start of league play. And what's interesting about this year in particular is the Big Ten, top to bottom, is as good as I've seen it. I mean, there are no, we say this all the time, there's no nights off. There literally are no nights off. I mean, Northwestern was expected to be the worst team, and all of a sudden they're giving teams a run for their money. They almost beat Michigan State the other night. So, I mean, there might not be that clear-cut, national champion, no-brainer, but you're just 4 or 5 teams that you could make a legitimate case could push for a Final Four berth. And then you add in the fact that even the back end of the league is as good as it's been in a long, long time. Momentum is going to be as important as ever. Nebraska, like I said, finally has some. You cannot lose that in these final 2 non-conference games. You not only have to win, but you have to play well, and you have to continue to build this, kind of rhythm that you got going last weekend, and carry that over these first 2 games to where you have a real identity and guys know their roles and everything's just kind of clicking. Because if they can play anywhere remotely close to the way they did at Indiana against Purdue, they can compete with anybody in this conference. But as we've seen time and time again, the dramatic highs and lows this team can go through make it kind of unpredictable to know if that's going to be the case.
Right. Well, there you have it. Nebraska hosts North Dakota tomorrow. That game is going to be televised on BTN+. It starts at 5 p.m. Central Time. Well, for Robin Washut, I'm Allie Snow, reporting for HuskerOnline.